I was thinking of making a video yesterday evening about how the Japanese release of the Mario movie later this week frees up Nintendo to move beyond focusing on their Mario sales window and to start to concentrate on their strategy for the period until the end of the year, or at least until they go full tilt on the Zelda anniversary. My theory was that any day now we could start to expect Nintendo to reveal a whole lot more. I didn't make this video because it's always hugely risky doing this kind of thing midweek, and in hindsight I'm glad, because as so often, Nintendo has gone and committed some news which would have scooped that video, and frankly Nintendo like to reveal things in sequence over the course of a week, so while I feel like Raiders is probably their biggest deal that they want to give attention to right now, it would not completely astonish me if they did something else tomorrow or Thursday as well. At any rate, let's look at the big news we have here. Splatoon Raiders has officially been dated and it's coming out in the July slot on July the 23rd and for the price of $50. Now, the late July slot is often a fairly significant one for Nintendo because of the company taking quite a bit of time off during August, like much of Japan, and while there's the odd downloadable title usually, such as Dragon Drive or Kirby's Dream Buffet, which have released during the main part of the August month, it's rare to see a significant retail game prior to the last week of the month, and sometimes not even until September. With both Splatoon and Fire Emblem already having being tested for this slot, with Splatoon 2 and Three Houses both doing particularly well there, it was always a toss-up for me as to which of these two significant franchises would take the slot, and this is making me think that Fortune's Weave will instead move into at least September, assuming of course that it doesn't do a Three Houses and slip out of its initial release window and into next year. It certainly feels like an 11th of June game is conspicuous for not being revealed just yet, and I certainly buy the concept that's been touted of them doing a big Star Fox reveal at late notice, possibly as soon as this week to coincide with the Japanese launch of the Mario movie into cinemas, possibly early next week once the film has had a bit of time to get people excited about Fox once again. It's also possible, of course, that Nintendo uses this period of major hype in Japan to push other properties which have a particular resonance in the Japanese region besides Splatoon, which is obviously one that is particularly big in Japan. So a Fire Emblem presentation of some kind or a post-launch update of some kind for Tomodachi Life might both fit this description. Let's talk the game itself. They confirm that the title is single-player focused, which is an interesting turn of phrase, which doesn't preclude some kind of multiplayer element, either at first or added later, especially since there is multiplayer referenced in the small print. And actually checking the listing on the Switch 2 itself's pre-order page, it seems that this is online multiplayer, which is pretty cool, although it does seem like in local play, the game is single-player only. Now, I wouldn't have been completely astonished to see some kind of small multiplayer option, a bit like the ones in Donkey Kong Bonanza and Super Mario Odyssey, but the details on the page, I think, preclude this as a likelihood. Price-wise, it's a little less than a full-on title in the $50 range. Now, there are a few ways to interpret this. One is that they are leveraging amiibo in a big way, as those are some very awesome looking and quite detailed seeming amiibo, and so they probably want to make their margins on the amiibo rather than relying so much on the game itself. Two is that they're basically now baking in a price rise for the main system, and so they might decide to pull back on the price of games for a little bit. Three is that the game is just not that huge, and this is a price that seems commensurate with the scale of the experience. Truth be told, until we see Yoshi and Raiders, it will be very difficult to say for sure. It was always obvious that the scale of this title might end up being slightly less than a main Splatoon, and I've speculated before that it started as a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition Plus game for Splatoon 3, but ended up outgrowing those humble roots. I expected $60, which in Switch 2 terms is more like their second tier WarioWare Mario vs. Donkey Kong style pricing, but $50 puts it into Metroid Prime Remastered territory. And this makes me wonder about how they plan to position Raiders. You see, the main reason to dial down on price is that you think demand is soft, but we know Splatoon has a lot of hardcore fans who I'm sure will be desperate to pick this game up. The difficulty is those fans are disproportionately young compared to other Nintendo properties fans. I covered data on this last year, but it's natural as it became such a hit in schools 10 years ago, and Nintendo will be very well aware that many of these people don't have Switch 2s. Therefore, I could see this game as being priced aggressively to expand Switch 2 ownership and to encourage people to keep playing Splatoon. I would not expect the same kind of treatment to go to forthcoming Zelda titles, and frankly, if there is an Ocarina of Time game coming up, I think there's a very significant chance it will be in the $80 bracket, if not then in the $70 window. Another possibility is that they decide to expand it later on with DLC in the manner of Donkey Kong Bonanza's Emerald Rush, where they effectively turned a $70 title into a $90 one for the most committed fans. I'm not sure I see this as being likely with Raiders, but some kind of DLC, perhaps in 2027, could be a good way to keep the game alive and increase its overall profitability. I suspect this will depend on initial sales and the current status of Splatoon 4. There's no hint of any narrative elements in this trailer as far as I can glean, and I must admit I'm not a particular follower of the Inkling lore, and in fact I'd completely forgotten the narrative to any great degree for previous games before playing the single player for Splatoon 3, and was surprised by how much I enjoyed this aspect of the title. Then again, I don't think it was really trailed all that much in Splatoon 3, so I hope we will see more from it. In terms of developers, obviously the core of the team is likely to be EPD Group 5, the Splatoon and Animal Crossing team, and by now I suspect they have expanded to the point where they can likely sustain both series independently. If anything, I suspect Group 5 is now going to be in the position that EPD 8, the Odyssey and Bonanza group, is in, of having a mainline and a branch group itself, with Raiders likely being developed by the branch group, and in fact having a mainline Splatoon team alongside. When the team worked with the Animal Crossing developers, they effectively pulled a lot of artistic and other talent to work on one game full tilt, while a core group of developers were prototyping the other title. If they decided to do this with Splatoon and have a spin-off and a separate group, and they can also do the same with Animal Crossing, with perhaps another project in the Animal Crossing world being developed alongside, maybe for theme parks or mobile, if not for actual games, it will make both series far more resilient, and I think if they were willing to expand out the EPD roster for Donkey Kong and Tomodachi Life, they will see Splatoon and Animal Crossing as having a similar development priority. We might of course see some reference to the new Nintendo Studios Singapore, although probably still to be credited, as they were on Tomodachi Life, as Bandai Namco Studios Singapore. 20 of the people credited on Splatoon 3 for art and cinematic roles also are credited on Tomodachi Life, which, to be fair, seems to be a significant portion of the Singapore crew, although by no means all. Of course, we know that the Bandai team have worked on multiple other games over the years, and there's no particular reason to think that they couldn't have worked on Tomodachi and Splatoon concurrently, or even serially, with Tomodachi potentially having been finished last year but kept back a long time, either in order to put it into the window of the film, given that it will be a big and popular game, and maybe due to particularly elaborate localization and testing requirements for a game which invites so much user-generated content and is so region-specific in the way it is put together. Still, while I can definitely see Nintendo leveraging assist studios, this does strike me as likely to be an internal effort for the most part, given the way Nintendo are positioning their studios and, frankly, the importance of Splatoon and Animal Crossing to Nintendo. Splatoon 3 was nearly 4 years ago, and so they have had a significant amount of time to build a full team around the property, even with the DLC in 2024. For my part, I'm really excited. I never really got around to playing the Splatoon 3 first player mode. Octo Expansion's pretty high difficulty put me off single player Splatoon for a bit, but thanks to urging from someone in the comments of one of these videos actually, I completed it recently and it was absolutely terrific. I really enjoyed it. This looks significantly more fully featured and seems like a great expansion of the core concept of the game and a worthy way to keep the property alive. I love the nautical aesthetic and the way it seems to mix lots of different gameplay types that we've seen, as well as having perhaps more of a crafting element to add on where you can develop your weapons. I'm intrigued to see how the fishing works as well. Of course, the amiibo look particularly awesome. I'm not really a fan of Shiver, Fry, and the Big Man compared to Pearl and Mariner, but these are amazing designs. Shiver's fishing net and samurai sword style rod looks pretty rad, and the boy Fry sits on is a brilliant bit of design work. And check out how the squid communicator sits on Big Man. I'll be very intrigued to see the price they put on these, as they really do look amazing. Plus, it's a reminder to get back to working on that video on Amiibo that's been on the back burner the last few months. Let's quickly look at some forecasts then. 30%. I think more information on Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave will drop by the end of April. 50% Splatoon Raiders paid DLC will drop by the end of 2028, and possibly pushing into 2028 if they decide to use it as a way to stave off questions about Splatoon 4 if they need to take more time on that title. 70% Bandai Namco Singapore will receive a credit on Splatoon Raiders. That's it for now, I think. Do check out the Patreon for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.